Hi, I'm Christina Dennis, and you are listening to the Recovered Life Show. Every week, we bring you a Recovered Life discussion about rewiring your brain and how understanding your brain will help you fully live your best recovered life. Remember, addiction is a life-threatening condition, and the information in this discussion is provided as a resource only and is not to be used or relied on for any diagnostic or treatment purposes. This is not a substitute when professional diagnosis or treatment is needed. Now let's jump into the discussion. Welcome to Recovered Life Discussions. You are in the room Rewire Your Brain, and we have been in a beautiful study of Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. The premise of her book is to study emotions and really deep dive into the language around them, with the understanding that once we have language, they help inform our feelings. They also help us know exactly what to do next. And the whole purpose of this, and the reason why it pulls back to the title of Rewiring Your Brain, is that I have learned so much about different emotions, and the more words and language we have around it, the easier it is for me to communicate them, for us to communicate them with each other, and the deeper the connection. And I believe she's really hit the mark. It's been a deep dive into, I think it's something like 96 emotions, and there have been ones that we've done there. The replays are available for every chapter, but it is a discussion, which means even if you don't have the book, we want people to come up, right at the beginning, if you feel so inclined and feel comfortable, to kind of discuss the words and what those phrases or those emotions mean to you. I think there's a lot to be learned, and I know for me, and I believe, Deanna, I'll let you speak for yourself, that this has been a real beautiful exercise of understanding human nature and ourselves. And just some quick ground rules. I, am Christina Dennis, and I am a recovery coach who focuses on helping people let go of codependent behaviors, but have been in recovery since 1997. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't know this, but Brene Brown is also in recovery, and you can see it throughout her work. And she does it even, especially in the second half of the chapter that we're going to discuss today, has I keep saying disgust because that's one of the emotions that we're going to discuss today, is got some real direct connections to recovery, and I just love it. Deanna, how have you? I mean, this isn't an easy chapter, is it?
No, it's not an easy chapter. I didn't, one of the things, so do you want me to go, do you want me
Why
to
don't you
read?
read it? Yes, read it so people know what's in front of them. We're
Let
really
me,
selling it well, aren't we? It's
I
not
know.
easy. These are hard things. Why stick
Okay.
around? Go
Uh,
ahead.
so we are on chapter 12. I just needed to find the word, honestly, so it helped me go back the pages. Um, Places we go when we feel wronged. And we've already discussed some things, but we've been talking about anger, contempt, disgust, dehumanization, hate, and self-righteousness. And for me personally, I thought hate was like, I'm not, I don't even need to read that one. I don't have hate in my heart. Like, I didn't think I needed to, but it's good. And then self-righteousness, I feel like I need a whole extra chapter on self-righteousness. So I'm excited to hear what other people have to discuss about this stuff.
Yes, yes. Like you said, these are the fun ones, but they are really important. And last week we were not able to meet, so just a quick reminder: we did already cover anger and contempt, and a little bit on what disgust is. And what I thought we'd do is just kind of pick up where we left off, with discussed and kind of move into the other ones. And you know, even though it is not necessarily the feel good, I think it is so healing for us to understand the language behind it. And I just want to encourage people to raise their hand if they'd like to come up and kind of share with us what it feels like to you. We do only use first names here. This is recorded. It is rebroadcasted as a podcast as well as available for replay. So we ask that you use first names only. I mean, obviously, I introduced both my names, so I'm fine with using my last name, but we do try to protect everybody and want them to feel comfortable. And what does all this have to do with recovery, right? Well, you know, it's the feelings and it's the emotions behind that. And so this deep dive is such a healing journey for each one of us. And, you know, I know for myself that in my first couple years of recovery, I heard phrases like feelings aren't facts. But since then, even though that may or may not be true, I've understood that feelings are important and healing is necessary in recovery. And it's the feelings that inform my decisions often, whether I like it to be or not. And so taking the time to understand them has been incredibly important for my recovery. And I thought we would pick up with disgust. And I was going to ask you to reread those questions, Deanna, because you know, we've had the break in between that are so interesting, the emotion discussed and kind of the origins of it, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to read a couple things here that probably invoke some disgust in your feelings of disgust. I can't say that for sure, but for me, most of them do. I might be willing to try eating monkey meat under some circumstances. It bothers me to hear someone clear their throat full of mucus. It does. If I see someone vomit, it makes me sick to my stomach. It would not upset me at all to watch a person with a glass eye take the eye out of the socket. Even if I was hungry, I would not drink a bowl of my favorite soup if it had been stirred by a used but thoroughly washed fly swatter. Gross.
Yeah, they kind of help you get there, don't they? To what it is. And why do we need to know what the word disgust is? It's because disgust is the gateway to dehumanization. And I think that is so interesting how we use the word disgust and how they study it. Disgust is a fascinating emotion. It's illusion. You know what? I might not be able to read my handwriting or a puzzle. It makes sense why we are disgusted by things that contaminate our food, which is what the actual emotion is, and that's where it comes from. But why does this feeling relate to emotion extend itself so deeply into our social world so that people will feel disgusted by certain ethnic groups, racism, homosexuality, homophobia, or by a variety of social and moral violations that don't involve anything that's physically contaminated? And I think that's one of the most interesting things about the emotion because it comes from a place of physical, you know, like feeling disgusted is something that's supposed to protect us from eating or being around food that will make us sick. But we use the emotion, you know, all the time. And I know that a lot of us get into recovery and we are changing, but I think that we live in a world that, you know, sadly is polarized and it's important to talk about these things. So it sounds weird, but it's real. We use this toward people. And the reason why I wanted to review it a little bit and see what everybody thinks about when you have felt disgusted by a human, what was behind it, you know, when we deem something disgusting, it allows us to push that person away. And it's something that we originally would have felt through physical senses: sight, smell, touch, sound, taste. But by the actions of people, it tends to be, we're disgusted in different states, from mild, dislike, avoidance, oh, I'm going to avoid that person because they talk with food in their mouth, all the way to this group of people are really bad. And all states are disgust are triggered by the feeling of repulsion and believing that the person is toxic. And it's just so interesting that what researchers are saying about us, those of us who feel disgusted by something, someone, that it is an interpersonal disgust. When it's that way, it's about a human. It's we are trying to protect ourselves from unseemly behavior, almost a contamination of the soul. So something that was turned into something that was going to protect our health, we are using and feeling that emotion of disgust in order to try to protect our soul. And so I'd love to hear what everybody who is up here, oh, welcome Haven and Kathy, feel about that word and that emotion. Deanna?
Disgust. I recently, this I might be confusing this with anger as I think about this story, but this is part of understanding the language, is talking about it. I think I recently encountered somebody that said they were disgusted. They actually said disgusted, that they were disgusted by people that still wear masks. And this is my husband's coworker. And he said, I just want to rip that mask off his face. It's just disgusting that he would follow like a sheep or something like that. And like he physically wanted to do something about this emotion he had. And my husband dealt with it. He was kind and just said something, but it made me think about how easily people can fall into that disgusting feeling. I personally don't. I can't think of things that really, really disgust me because I really, really try to understand where people are coming from. So I also, Christina last week had said to think times that we have done something disgusting. And I really couldn't wrap my head around thinking about that. So I also thought maybe I should ask somebody else in my life if I have acted in a way or showed signs of that emotion and reflect on it. But it just really made me think about how easy we can fall into that feelings of disgust for people. So I'd love to hear what other people have to say about it. I'm still learning.
Yes, I had to think about this too, and I can tell you for me, it was when I was thinking about groups or places where I felt that feeling, where I felt wretched, and I have to say, sexual predators, which we'll get into about even using that word, predator. See, I've already attached it. People who perform sexual assault, sex trafficking, those kinds of things. Those are real and alive in our world. And I have to say that that feeling comes to me when I hear stories of people who are being prosecuted for those types of behaviors. Kathy.
I'm trying to think the last time I felt disgust, and it was a long time ago. Actually, felt disgust at the behaviour. I mean, you can see, on bin day, it's not very nice and things like that. But disgust with another human being, but not disgust with them. I felt disgusted. I felt disgust in my body, in my soul, and it was when I'd found out my brother had had an affair. Um, I was polar, and I remember I was walking along the River Thames with my then girlfriend, and I stopped and I had to go to a bin and I threw up. Sorry, everybody. Um, it had that visceral emotion on me, and I'm still to this day a little puzzled why. Um, affairs happen. Life is complicated. Yada yada yada. God knows I've been out with married women. So yeah, it's an odd one. I mean, we feel disgusted, and it's a useful thing, because there's I think we were talking last week about there's some societal pressure or societal influence on disgust for people like predators. Some of it is natural to us. We can't bear to see children hurt. We can't bear to see, most of us can't bear to see animals hurt, things like that. But there is some societal collective disgust with some actions. But I think things like lying and bullying are the ones that I would say, if we were doing a kind of written exercise, I would probably tick those off. But the last time I felt it was discussed at I guess at being lied at feeling let down over the behaviour of somebody I'd held in such high esteem. So, but yeah, I'm still sucking a thoughtful tooth on my reaction to that one. So thank you. Great word. Horrible emotion.
Uh-oh, my app's being glitchy. Deanna, you may have to jump in if it take a few seconds. Haven, welcome to the speaking stage. Tell us what you think.
Well, thank you for the topic. My instinct was along Deanna's at first. I've got children in the background, so if you hear them, they are being active like Deanna's cat. Um, uh, I didn't think I really had disgust. Like I go straight towards like sadness or dislike, but with understanding. Um, but what hasn't been mentioned yet, and was my first instinct, really the only thing that I could really attach myself to at the beginning, again, if it were a written exercise, my first sentences would be self-disgust, like looking at my thighs touching and being just grossed out by it, or looking at the quantity of food that I ate and being disgusted in myself, and that it's so much easier for me to hate me, or to, again, there's the word hate versus disgust, but for me to have my stomach turn over the idea of something than it is for other people. Like with other people, I'm much more understanding. I don't hold anybody else in my life, fictional or non-fictional, to the standards that I do. And I guess it could be self-preservation. Society definitely holds value to a certain type of woman. And it's changing, but I'm 38, so the majority of my life has been very, it's really been pushed on me what I'm supposed to look like. And so physical disgust is probably like the first one that comes to mind. And then when Christy, you were talking about, like sexual predators, like my feelings are like, they're so mentally sick, but if I think of the action, then I understand, like that turns my stomach. Like cruelty to animals, really makes me disgusted. But the list of questions, I'm like, yeah, I would have eaten that soup. I'm like, I don't know if that's my food addiction talking, but yeah, I would have done that.
That's the one I
Like,
would do too.
right? I'm like, somebody like clearing their throat. Like it might get my attention. I might not like it, but I'd probably just go get them a tissue. I feel like I have a really big heart, and more of like, I lean towards understanding more than judgment or disgust or anything like that. And I'm grateful. And again, Christy, it's because what you said, it's like I am in recovery. I've been in recovery since I was 14 years old, and I'm 38. And so I feel like maybe my mind processes are different, because of the amount of work that I've put into to reframing things, and to having a lot of compassion for where people are and where they're coming from. But the longer I think about this and the more people that are talking about it, I definitely see more areas. Like I'm just thinking of, the videos that try to get people to be vegetarian. Like those are disgusting. Which is the impact, right? That is their desired effect, is to have people not eat meat. And And so I'm definitely relating more and more to this as the conversation continues. And so thank you.
Yes, it's so, and the reason why I wanted to cover it again was because, first of all, I see some people have their hands up and the app is being really glitchy. Deanna, I don't know if you can try to bring them up. I've tried to bring you up, sir, and it's not working every time I hit it. So we'll keep trying. It the reason why I wanted to review discuss is because it moves into the dehumanization process, which is not something that's going to be fun to talk about, and I really want to get to hate and self righteousness. That's a sentence, isn't it? But I think that, in recovery, the word hate and self righteous are maybe more applicable. But I definitely want to talk about the role of disgust in dehumanization, because disgust is the way, and Kathy, you brought this up. Disgust is the way, when we can feel disgusted with a group of people, it helps us override our natural laws of hurting other people, right? It's what she talks about, the response of dehumanization is when we use conflict. It's a conflicting motive in all of us, and we all have places in history that I think everyone's been educated on, where we've seen many people be, slaughtered based on the fact that they were a certain religion. We've seen hate crimes show up because of it, and every one of us, every human, it is a natural place not to want to do harm for other people. So the language around disgust is used in order to dehumanize a group of people, dehumanize a person. And it's the whole idea of making the enemy, seem less than human and hence not worthy of human treatment. And they call it, to dehumanize, they call it the common enemy, the creating a common enemy. They create these people are bad, these people are rats. We saw that used in the slang during the Holocaust, and you can look at history and see it over and over again. So there is a process when people are slaughtered and we have these genocide in which we make them less than human, and or the person does. We become accepting of violations against human nature, human spirits, and carefree about doing harm to these people because we now have taken away their humanness. And I think that's important to know, as we're looking at some of the duress that's in our world and some of the things that are happening, even in my country, some of the hate that is coming out. We talked about this last room, about the fact that there's a political division in the United States that is on par with prior to the Civil War, which of course, had to do with slavery, and that right now we're in the same place of division as the Israeli and the Palestine conflict is. And I thought it was important, even though it's not pleasant, to talk about it, because if we don't call out dangerous language, it can easily slide into that. And so successful dehumanization causes a moral exclusion. Groups are targeted based on their identity, gender, ideology, skin color, religion, ethnicity, age, and are depicted as less than human. They are depicted as evil. And I'd just love if anybody wants to join in. Julie, I know you just came up. Would you like to speak?
Sure. Thanks, Christina. I was just, when thinking about disgust, for me personally, one of the things that comes up is, um, I have talked about before. My oldest brother that have been very close with through my life is an addict, and in the last probably like 6 or 7 years, has started to use meth as his drug of choice. And, um, when I talk to friends or even like other family members of more extended family, not my not my close family, I can see the disgust that people feel when you talk about that drug. And I know that it comes from a lot of the behaviors and a lot of the criminal activity and just a lot of the lifestyle that comes along with that particular addiction. But it just is, it's really hard because there's a part of me that feels that too, and I can't deny it, even though this is my one of the people that I love very most in my life, and people try to tell me things like, oh, well, he's not your brother anymore. He's not that person. And I really have this strong inclination to want to protect me from hearing that and to protect people from thinking that about him because he's so much more than that to me. So it's really hard to see that in people's eyes, even when their words may say something different, and they may, you know, um, tell me how sorry they are, or whatever it is that they're saying to me to convey empathy, or other things. I can see a lot of that disgust, and it's hard for me to know that I have some of that too. But then there are also times where you know because of the disease and the addiction and the behavior, he tries to manipulate me a lot, and that produces disgust in me. And in a way, that reaction keeps me from being from being the victim of that, I guess, or like falling into that pattern with him. Is that the manipulation gives me a bit of disgust because I can see it for what it is. And while I love him immensely and want him to be sober and stop hurting himself and be free from his addiction, um, it's you know I heard a lot of people saying that they just feel empathy for people, and I have a tremendous amount of empathy for him, and I try not to have it be sympathy, but it's complicated. And I guess that's just what's in my mind right now. It's just more complicated than one thing or another. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming up because you're so right, and it hasn't been shared before about how people take the disease of addiction and will feel that feeling, about certain types of drug uses, and it's easily bringing this person into that people are disgusted by it because they don't understand it or are shocked. And, just even the statement, well, that's not your brother, is a dehumanizing statement. And for those of us who are recovering from, chemical addiction, I think we can all feel that way, like Haven so eloquently spoke, where we are disgusted with ourselves. So thank you so much. I wonder if anybody has anything to add to the dehumanization, the language around dehumanization. I have to say I hadn't thought about it in a long time. As uncomfortable as I am with the discourse that's going on in this country, and I feel that feeling when people start, having a common enemy culture and see it, I think that speaks more to hatred than to dehumanization. But, I just want to make sure that I open up the floor around the term dehumanization before we move on to hatred.
Oh, Kathy, go right
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Deanna. Thank you. Yeah, we have a very similar environment, atmosphere in the UK at the moment. We have some horrible policies regarding legitimate refugees. We're exporting them to Rwanda, believe it or not, and there's no justification for that. That comes purely from a place of hate and disgust at somebody wanting to start a new life or flee from conflict. And it's yeah, there's a rift in society here at the moment between them that think we're full and them that no, we're not. um, and when people are, I get disgusted at some of the views that I hear at the moment, but they're probably disgusted with me. But once you reach that point, reconciliation is difficult. So yeah, it's permeating. I think disgust for other groups is clearly very deliberate. It's driven by someone else. It's manipulated, like you say. It goes against human nature, and that in itself is worthy of disgust. But you have to be careful where you point it. So that's my little rant over.
I just want to say that everything you guys are saying is just awesome. I mean, it's not awesome, it's just so true. And I really appreciate the shedding light on dehumanizing people in drug addiction and homelessness and refugees. I didn't really have that on my radar when I started reading this. And I live outside of Seattle where we have a lot of all of those things. And it really it's really important to me that when we go out into our communities that we see humans, and that when we see people on the side, I mean, I, I see some crazy things in Seattle, people using the restroom on the side of a building of a restaurant, and it makes it's like, oh, that's disgusting. But then I try to find it in my heart that, well, there's more to that story. There's more to that act that is happening. And yeah, that's just where I'm at right now, is just thinking, like, reminding myself to remember that people are part of our communities. And whether you'd like to see that or not, it's still true. And to treat people with decency. And, we are all just moments away from everything shifting in our lives all the time. So that could be us in those situations. And so yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that stuff. It really has my heart turned into a different area right now, which is good. So thanks.
And I think one of the purposes of having this conversation, reading this book, probably one of the things that was on Dr. Brene Brown's heart was to call out the language. And, she says, as she wraps up the discussion around dehumanization, that it is up to us to call out dangerous language. And disgust is the gateway to dehumanization. And when we start hearing things, just like you said, Deanna, about, well, they're not who they used to be, or they're not human, or they're whatever, that we also, again, remember that they are human. And dehumanization is the way that hate crimes are that it's one of the beginnings, right? It's one of the root causes. They figure it out. And no, but I mean, I personally don't like to look at myself in that way, but I'm grateful to have this book. I'm grateful to have this conversation. And what I take away from this is that it's up to me to call out language and say, wait a minute, that person is a human. Haven?
Yes. Again, I was like, I don't relate to this at all. And I don't know if I do, as far as like dehumanizing other people. I feel like I'm very good at relating and seeing other sides of the story. But
I
the hate
believe you are.
crimes that I'm thinking of, it's like my husband is one of the most kind, compassionate, loving people I've ever met. Yet he says like things about um, what's going on in the society, right? Is like, I just want to kill them and gut them. And I'm like, whoa, like thinking that it's all on like one person, and we're on different sides of a political spectrum, but he sends me hate articles, like confirming the way he believes all day long. And it's painful, to be a part of it. And this is a sensitive topic, but, I relate. It's what's coming up for me, right? Is, going back through my own sexual history and thinking of like, how often was I actually a willing participant versus being the disgusting drunk at the bar that didn't deserve to have any rights, right? because I was so like disgustingly drunk. It was okay for guys to take advantage of me. And I know that that is, I hear from women in my 12-step programs, like, well, she shouldn't have put herself in that position, you know, and it's like the disgust of being so out of control that I deserve all of my consequences. And I've seen it from cops with me, like, because my car was stolen because I left the keys at the bar. Uh, and it's just that this disgust leads to what is the word, like approval of mistreating people. And so it's yeah, it's scary. It's scary to actually like open my eyes and see how it's happening, and not just on the obvious scales, right? But on a lot of different areas. Thank you.
So good. So good. I'm really glad. I feel we're doing our part by talking about it. I want to talk about hate. I don't want to talk about it, but I think it's important to talk about it. And she opens this emotion up with why we hate. Hatred will always motivate people for destructive actions. Hatred is a combination of several other negative emotions: anger, repulsion, disgust, contempt, and fear. We feel hate toward individuals or groups who are intentionally malicious and unlikely to change. This is what she's saying, that most of us feel hate toward them. We can develop hatred for people we don't know simply because they are affiliated to the ideology that doesn't align with our beliefs. And what this ends up being is that research shows that why people are able to hate is there's a lack of direct contact to them that can actually strengthen the hate. So the more that we other people by being disgusted by them, the more that we other people by, what we talked about, asymmetrical aversion, the easier it is for them to hate. And hate is, interestingly enough, fueled by our own need for connection. It is that common enemy intimacy. Hate moves us from place to place. It's a current and it needs to continue to travel. And those currents are provided by cynical leaders, cynical authority who capitalizes on people's insecurity to bolster their own power. So it's really manipulation. And I think that's kind of interesting to see with the political climate and everything that's happening in the world, that many of us are being manipulated into hatred. Like if we really knew somebody and knew something about them, they would be a lot harder to hate. And I want to open it up because I think that this is, the goal of hate is not simply to hurt, but it is to ultimately eliminate or destroy the other person, either mentally through humiliation. Actually, Deanna, do you have that quote close by? The goal of hate is not to merely hurt. Do you see that in your reading?
Maybe.
It says the goal of hate is not merely to hurt, but to ultimately eliminate.
Oh, yeah.
Would you read that?
Um,
Because I think it's so powerful.
I'm not sure if I have it.
Oh,
One
okay.
second.
I'll try to read my handwriting. So this is from the research of social scientists, and what they share is the goal of hate is not merely to hurt, but it is ultimately to eliminate or destroy the target, either mentally through humiliation, through treasuring the feelings of revenge, socially by excluding or ignoring, physically by either killing toward torture, letting the wrongdoers suffer. And when you think about that, that hate isn't just a simple word, oh, I don't like that person. It actually is that we want to more than just even hurt them. We want to ultimately eliminate them. And I thought about, I was raised that you don't use the word hate, And now that I've kind of really pulling it apart, I realize, wow, that's very dangerous. And I'd love to hear what you have to say, Deanna.
Well, I found it as you were reading it.
Read it again because I butchered it.
Um, Oh, okay, okay. I thought you did a fantastic job, but I will read it again. The goal, uh, I found the most devastating explained that the goal of hate is not merely to hurt, but to ultimately eliminate or destroy the target, either mentally, humiliating, treasuring feelings of revenge, socially, excluding or ignoring, or physically, killing, torturing, which may be accompanied by the goal to let the wrongdoers suffer. You know, the end part right there, the goal is to let the wrongdoers suffer. It's like it's not enough that what they're doing and what you're disgusted by and what you hate that they're doing be just out of your vision. Like if, out of sight, out of mind. This is saying like I need you to suffer. I want to feel I don't even know what a person would want to feel to wish that upon another person. I personally just don't have this in my heart. Um, it's not that I'm saying hate doesn't exist, it absolutely does. But I've been wronged. I have been so wronged in my life by people that w- wanted to hurt me. They planned to hurt me and they did. And even though I have all this pain and sadness inside of me from these things, I think to myself, and maybe it's because of all the self-help books I read when I was a little kid, way too young to be reading them. I think to myself, well, that person did that to me because of something that happened to them, or that person said that because that's what they've learned, that's what they know. And then that's why I think I got into helping people is because I can see that hurt people hate, honestly. And that's not the phrase that is used that she uses, but that's kind of how I see it. And so I personally don't want anybody else to suffer because they think something differently of me or even because they've done something really, really bad in their life. I I work at a juvenile, I volunteer in a juvenile detention center, and I do work with children that have done some very, very bad things. And I would not be able to volunteer there the way that I do if I felt that what they did made them horrible people and they deserved to suffer for the crimes they committed. I think that is a special place that I get to be. And I don't know how I do this, but it is, I don't want the people that, I think I'm learning this. I'm learning by being in that environment that I don't want people to suffer so that they can learn their lessons. And now I'm like going on a tangent because I'm thinking of that. But yeah, that. Those are my thoughts on that.
I like that. I don't want people to suffer because I want them to learn their lessons. And I'll tell you, it's a very casually used word, hate. But I think that if it's truly the only word we can use, then there are definitely healing that needs to happen around it. She goes on to explain hate crimes are meant to terrorize so that fear is embedded so deeply that the heart of the community becomes that in the heart of the community that has experienced a hate crime, that fear becomes a crushing way of life for everyone. She also goes on to explain that hate is very hard to combat hate, but any mechanism, like what can we do to combat hate in our world? Any mechanism that we can do to understand things from the other person's point of view, love, critical thinking, wisdom, engagement with others who are in the hated group, at least makes hate less likely. It's hard to hate people up close when you know they are not so different than you. Julie, do you have anything you want to share about that? Okay.
I have something that was part of the passage that you just read. Well, it was before it, but I read in here somewhere that it said hate is fueled by our need for connection. And I thought that that was really interesting in everything that you're talking about, especially like in our society. And I've been dealing a lot with this the past couple weeks. I have two younger sisters, and I want to feel connected to them. I love them and I want to feel connected to them. I am I am realizing that um, we are not as connected as I want us to be, not because there's any hate involved, but because we have very different opinions on politics and uh, life issues. And they're young; they're 24 and 21. But I've heard some things come out of their mouths that I don't ever say anything because I don't know how to process it yet. They're wonderful, wonderful people. But I know that having the father that we have, language that he uses filters into their minds, and it can come out it sounds very hateful. And I feel that it's a slippery slope because we do want to be connected to people. And so we can, I'm guilty of this too, um, fall into agreeing with people because we want to feel connected. That camaraderie is nice. And agreeing with somebody about something that's based around hate is not good, is not a good way to connect with people. And yeah, so I like the thought of hate is fueled by our need for connection and to connect in different ways and to find different ways to connect than through hating something. And I
Yeah.
do want to say too, real quick, that I say real quick, but I'm rambling. That I've noticed this as well with my husband. So Haven, I think, already bounced, but that joking around can be, uh, it can lead to real problems. And so our language can, our language of just joking around. I know in our society there's so much music and funny shows that are great to laugh at, but they can turn feelings, just funny feelings, into feelings of hate pretty easily without us even noticing because our brains are just so fickle. So yeah, I'm loving this conversation today. So thanks, Christina.
It's not fun, right, to think about, but it's important. And I want to move on to self-righteous because I bet some people may want to talk about it. And the way that she describes self-righteousness really she relates it right back to recovery. And I love it. She says, the quote that she opens up with, self-righteous screams judgment against others to hide from the noise of the skeletons in their own closets. Woo, that's the opening quote around self-righteousness. And the way she opens it up is that she says that 25 years ago she heard somebody share about their self-righteousness in AA, and they described it, I like, when I get into a self-righteous mode, it's like a pig rolling around in shit. And she didn't know exactly what that meant, but she knew, she felt it in her bones that she did it too. And it was really quite funny. The researchers that define it says conviction that one's beliefs and behaviors are the most correct. People who exhibit self-righteousness see things in black and white, and if that's not recovery, when we first walk into recovery, I don't know what is. They're closed-minded to the inflexibility of ambiguity. And she uses this term that I have heard for many, many years in 12-step rooms called terminal uniqueness. And what that means is that my pain, the way I drank, the way my life is I'm terminally unique. I'm not at all like your drinking story. There's a reason why I'm supposed to be able to drink. And it made me laugh because as you've been around for a while, you start to see the people who are able to get sobriety. If you participate in a 12-step group, you see the path, you know the path, and you can see that terminal uniqueness where they believe that doesn't apply to me. I know better about my own life. That's a phrase that gets described about that person. And I know it, I've heard it before around me, especially in early sobriety. And she goes on to explain that self-righteous is different than righteousness. Self-righteous is when we feel morally superior and are trying to convince ourselves and others that we are doing the right thing. And one of the ways that we do is by having moral outrage response to injustice. That's okay. No, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. It's okay. It's not, self righteousness is not having moral outrage response to something of injustice. That can be righteous anger. And if it's used against justice, or injustice, moral outrage is self enhancing and self righteous anger. So when we are just morally outraged and it isn't about an injustice that we're seeing, we are actually displaying terminal uniqueness. We're the exception. I think I'm better than anyone else. And the problem with that is that it slips right into, if I'm better than anyone else, then I can be worse than anybody else. And letting go of I am better than slowly releases our need to be worthless at the same time. We're less focused on moral outrage and we're doing the next indicated step. And I think this is so important for people who are in recovery because I know from my own experience, and I've heard it over and over and over again in the rooms, I am an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. And it speaks to being one of many or being right sized. I'm not better than anybody, but I'm not worse than anybody. And I love the way she explains it because I know people who live in self righteousness. I know I was one of them even into years of recovery. And I love that she put self righteousness into the form of terminally unique because for me, that's easier to process. When I feel like I'm terminally unique, I may be a little bit into self righteousness. What did you think, Deanna?
I liked this one. I liked thinking of self-righteousness because I like to think that I'm not self-righteous ever, which is not true. And it's like the thought is like, of course I don't think I'm better than anybody else. Like I truly genuinely don't think I'm better than anybody else. But what happens is my brain gets a hold of me during moments, during conversations that I might not stop and think about it very well. And so then I have been self-righteous the last week. I have been. I I I wrote it down in my gratitude book. I was doing a gratitude journal and I could recognize that I'm reading the story and I'm judging the story. I'm judging the writer. And I'm like, what why am I doing this? This is not who I want to be. And I still am working this out of why I'm feeling this way this week. Like what is going on in my life that's making me I don't want to say I'm not looking down on people. I'm catching myself having thoughts that are not in alignment with with righteousness. I don't want to be self-righteous. So I'm really, really glad that this was a topic of discussion. Um, I, yeah, I, I'm not self-righteous, but I have self-righteous moments and thoughts that I need to recognize and stop and put myself into perspective and know that I'm not terminally unique. I'm I'm magical. I am unique, but yeah. So I'm just going on now because I'm thinking how self-righteous I have been.
Julie, I want to make sure if you want to weigh in that you have the opportunity to. It's up to you. Okay. I know we have just a couple minutes left, and I love it. If you think you're not self righteous, that might also be self righteousness playing. And so, I really loved and wanted to bring it home to that terminally unique. For me, it's anytime that I think I would never do it that way. Oh my God, what are they thinking? That's not the way I would do it. I'm better. I know what I'm doing. And I think it's so dangerous for people who are in recovery, to it's so good to have this kind of language around it so that we can go, okay, wait a minute. If I'm thinking I would never do something somebody else is doing without really truly knowing if that's true, because I don't know the circumstances of why this person is doing it, then I'm definitely slipping into self-righteousness. And I think it's so important that we self-guard so that we don't have that slippery slope of I am better than you and now I am worse than you. Because being right-sized, being one of many, being in the middle of the herd is what protects my sobriety and keeps me on the road of recovery. And, that even goes to the moments when I am feeling self-righteous. I have a sponsor, very, very wise woman. She's 20 years more sober than me, maybe even possibly 30, and I'm at 25, and she will say, I'm not much, but I'm all I ever think about, and then kiss herself on her hand and just be kind to herself. And it speaks to, even though these are really ugly, hard emotions to discuss and safeguard, the whole point of being in recovery and having the support is that we do learn to love ourselves more and therefore love others more and be part of the group. So I just am grateful to be finished with some of those hard emotions, but also kind of wanting to end the room in a very self-loving way, which is every person in this world is self-righteous at one moment. And it's important to know the language of dehumanization so that when we see it, we call it out. It is important to understand when we're feeling disgusted, what is that all about? And, we spoke about several other last week, and we will continue next week with the last chapter of the book. So we've really got about 3 more rooms, 3 more shows, whatever you want to call it, on it. But it's been such a beautiful experience, and I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you. I think many of the people who got to speak had to leave, but thank you very much for speaking and sharing, and what a beautiful hour. Deanna, as always, thank you for your service.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.